Ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners, those who are watching, listening, 3M Creator, it's 3M Creator. Dear friends, Dr. Rakesh from USA, heartily, cordially welcome all of you. Every day we discuss, recollect, remember, remind our past, our past, our history provides us the way to go ahead in present. History gives us wisdom. Mathematics provide us quick answering powers. Science gives us deep analysis, and poetry gives us pleasures. Education of law makes us witty. All the subjects that our school students study fundamentally, basically, they have their particular importance in our life. It's the special training of our brain. How do we train our midbrain? It is in the form of infrastructure, in the form of platform provided by the different subjects of our school. Further, our freedom increases by going in next class, but when we change our school to college, college to university, our freedom becomes higher and higher, and we treat, accept, behave with full freedom, full independence, which is a great role of our education. In the field of education, different scholars of medical science, non-medical, commerce, arts, and even our research scholars, those who are studying in India and abroad, they know this thing that their independence and freedom, these are the primary factors to do something better, nicer, finer in the field of education. What does the mean of education? Education means not only the bookish knowledge, it gives us skills, provides us training, how to speak, how to behave, how to live in society, how to be responsible for our nation, for our motherland, for our forefathers. Our forefathers, foretellers, forecasters, freedom fighters, free thinkers, astronauts, astrologers came in India. They made us finer, nicer. Undoubtedly, our all recreators, restarters, reformers, even reporters made us conscious about our holy motherland. Their aim was to give us the true spiritual knowledge, science to spirituality, language to literature. Today we read different subjects in study, how these subjects were classified. Basically and fundamentally, these subjects were classified from philosophy, our all holy books of the holy religions of our holy motherland were written in the presence of nature. Nature is the common concept we have all around us. Nature keeps us in present. Present means the presence of Lord or God. Really, it is a great miracle, magical, musical. How we correlate, how do we generate, operate, and develop our stream of consciousness inside the body? How masses, how the stream of thoughts balances, imbalances, reaches in the mind. It is really recordable, praiseworthy, admirable, God gifted technology. Words fall short. Dear friends, if you want to understand presence of Lord or God, then you must meditate and think that our body is the temple of God, heart is the seat of God. Exactly, it is right. But how our soul can be unified with the super spiritual power of Lord or God? For that, we need sound and light. For creating the sound and light, externally we need words. By the repetition of the holy words, we feel re energized, we remember, recall, recount the blessings of Lord or God, and our soul becomes able to associate, correlate, generate uncounted energy. How this man has come on this earth? What is the objective of man's life on this earth? What is the value of our breaths? No one, no one is poor in this world. No man is lower than others because everyone is gifted with super spiritual blessings and grace all time, every time, every moment, every change that we have in our life, it happens with the command of Lord or God. So Dear friends, we are to keep ourselves in present. This present will make us able to feel the presence of Lord or God. According to Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj, who born in 1469, he addressed worldly people about the presence of Lord or God in air, fire, soil, sky, and water, and even light is the form of God, sound is the form of God. It is written commonly, it's the common concept about the evolution of this earth in all the holy religions of this holy land. Time to time, many researchers, discoverers, scientists were generated by this holy land and are being continued because this holy motherland is the land of beginners, starters, and initiators. Vasco da Gama, who discovered India in 1498, Gautam Buddha, who started Buddhism, Mahavir Swami, who started Jainism, and Swami Vivekananda, who started Ramakrishna Mission. According to Swami Vivekananda, he proved, advocated, and appealed in the spiritual religious conference of the USA by saying that, my brothers and sisters of the America, these two words were the symbol of purity, chastity, and sanctity. With full of character, Swamiji advocated these words. This was the cultural message of this holy land. At this rate, Swamiji proved that our holy motherland, holy culture is really remarkable and appreciable. Where there is the purity is the primary thing for them. Not only it happened in America, but the whole world reigned after Swami Vivekananda because of his purity, because of his character. Swamiji further says that my Indian holy motherland is known by its character, not by color. It is known by its climate, climatic change, cultural changes with unity and diversity we have in our country. At one place, Swamiji says, my country, people, or the citizen of my nation is known not by outwardnesses or dresses, but by culture and character. Our Indian people decorate themselves with character, human values, moralities, and spiritualities. Swamiji proved it that how one has power to change, to bring change in all. One word, one thought, one idea, one action can bring revolutionary and visionary change in the whole of the masses. These thoughts and ideas Swamiji further explained, defined, and expressed in front of our youngsters What does the mean of success? Success is not the name of any platform, but success is the name of continuity and regularity. Unrelentingly, unceasingly, and unstoppingly, when our efforts keep on, continue, then definitely success will come to them. So, dear friends, success is not the name of any fixed platform, but success is the name of continuity and regularity. All our resourceful persons know this thing, that firstly and primarily they are men, and man is known by its regularity, punctuality, honesty, and by its continuity. Numberless ideas and thoughts run in our mind and heart. According to medical science, in 1 minute, our one side of brain has power to create 72 ideas, and collectively it creates 216 ideas in 1 minute. It's the speed of the average common man. How is and what is the speed of a politician, economist, historian, astronomer, astrologer, advocates, advertisers, administrators? It is really beyond to reach. What changes, turns, twists we imagine, that is uncountable. So, dear friends, to be a real human being, to get perfect ecstatic joy in our life, we need to do meditation, repetition of the holy words, that will make our common man, our youngsters, visionary, revolutionary in his all kind of works. So it needs to know the change in our different works in the field of agriculture, industry, communication, transportation, hospitals, post offices, in all the fields of economy. Today it is the great need to know the fundamentals by knowing, by associating ourselves with nature. In the form of nature, we feel the presence of Lord or God. So, according to Swami Vivekananda, a man can never be alone, because his himself, he himself, his body itself is made by five elements: air, fire, soil, sky, and water. And we feel the presence of Lord firstly in these five elements. Apart from these things, around us we have birds, plants, trees, and geographically we see different changes in the climate according to different pressure and temperature. We count numberless forms of Lord or God around us. In daytime, how we can be alone? We have the sun. At night time, we have the moon, the earth, the sky, the stars. All these are also the forms of Lord or God. So, numberless miracles we have around us. Our body itself is the miracle. So, for that, we are to count the blessings and grace of Lord. We should say thank, respect, and welcome for all the gifts of God, gifts of nature. Dear friends, today our daily routine, How is our daily routine? How do we spend our 24 hours? It is all related to the objectives of our youngsters. How language helps and it becomes the tool for enhancing the talents of our youngsters in our society and nation. Language is both a system of communication between individuals and a social phenomena. The area of language and society. Sociolinguistics is intended to show how our use of language is governed by such factors as class, gender, race, etc. Dear friends, our literature is the study of our culture, and culture contains our styles, standards, manners, techniques that can be judged from our food, clothing, and shelter. So, these are all the part of our culture, and culture is expressed through language. A subsection of this area is anthropological linguistics, which is concerned with form and use of language in different cultures and to what extent the development of language has been influenced by cultural environment. The study of language and society, social linguistics can be dated to about the middle of the 20th century. Before that, there were authors who commented on how language use was influenced or indeed guided by socially relevant factors such as class, profession, age of age or gender. Indeed, the father of modern linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure, 1857 to 1913, saw language as a type of social behavior, and in this he reflected French sociological thinking of his day, above all that of his contemporary Turkey 1858 to 1917, but a set of independent, objective principles, in short, a methodological for investigating social factors in language use was not available until some decades after the advent of Chaucerian structuralism in the early 1960s. A number of linguistics in America began to investigate English uses in the United States from a social point of view. Since then, there has been a flood of a flood of publications in this vein, primarily in America, but soon afterwards in Europe as well. Notably in Britain, methods in social linguistics. The roots of social linguistics are to be found in traditional dialectology. The common denominator between the two disciplines is their concern with language variation, the one with that on a social level, and the other with geographically determined variation. However, many aspects of dialectological research are acceptable to modern social linguistics. The chief deficiency of dialect investigation in the 19th century and early 20th century is that they were unrepresentative. That is, their informations consisted of a skewed selection of speaker, older, male, rural, non-mobile speakers were given preference as informants because many dialectologists were trained as historical linguists. They were frequently concerned with discovering the most archaic forms of language still spoken at their time, often on the assumption that the older forms were somehow more genuine. The kinds of speakers just alluded to were regarded as those who would speak the most conservative, hence, most genuine form of a language at any given time. This standpoint is quite different from that of present day social linguistics. Language use in society applies to all groups, young and old, male and female, rural and urban. Indeed, because the majority of the inhabitants of Western countries now live in cities, and because such concentrations of people tend to induce high amounts of language variation. Social linguists are more often than not concerned with language use in cities. In order to realize impartial investigations of language in society, it is necessary to employ objective methods. Care must be taken that the choice of informants be random and thus not subject to the possible bias of the field worker. Linguist, furthermore, consciously interviewing informants often has the disadvantage that the field worker has a standardizing effect on informants' use of language. A dialogue situation in which informants are not aware of their status as information is much more favorable and less likely to distort the results. Variation technologies have been developed here. For instance, getting information to talk about emotional matters generally draws their attention away from their use of language and hence further a more natural style, what linguists call a vernacular style. Principle of modern sociolinguist. The prior definition of one's area of investigation, the impartial choice of informants, the use of preferred methods of investigation, that is, tape recording rather than questionnaire, allowing for later control. Where possible, the anonymous collection of data, new methods had to be evolved in order to get reliable data. It is impossible to investigate a whole community because of size and complexity. However, to get a representative description of what is typical of speech of a city or region, all members of a community must have an equal chance of being selected for a survey. Consequently, individuals are selected at random from the total population because dialectology was associated with the study of conservative forms of language. Social linguists do not always use the term dialect. The more neutral term variety is often chosen because of the advantage that it does not imply contrast with a standard. The development of social linguist. The development of social linguist is bound up with the activity of American and British linguists. Since the early 1960s, first and foremost of those, first and foremost of these is William Labo, who, in a pioneering investigation of the English of New York City published in 1966, arrived at many new conclusions concerning language variation and language change. Labo stressed that structural system of the present and changes in languages of the past can be investigated in relating to each other. Language change can be observed in progress in present day language varieties. The fact that so called free variation was not in fact free at all about determined by deliberate, if not conscious, choices by speakers. Labo further stressed the need to collect data reliably. The linguist may be aware that informants will show the following features in their speech. One is style shifting during an interview. Two is varying degree of attention, that is, some speaker pay great attention to their own speech. So called audio monitoring. In casual speech, the attention paid is less. Three is degree of formality determined by the nature of the interview. This can vary depending on the way information react to the interviewer and the situations they are placed in. The difficulty referred to above, namely that people's linguistic behavior changes while being recorded, has been dubbed the observes paradox by Labo. His answer to this problem was to dwell the rapid and anonymous interview in which informants were not aware they were being interviewed by a linguist. The agents of this technique can be seen by considering how Labo collected data on English in New York City. To begin with, one should say that he was interested in the following linguistic variables. One is the presence or absence of syllable final r, the pronunciation of the fricative 2 and 3 and 3, the quality of various vowels. He chose two words in which these sound occurred, namely fourth floor, and then went round to a number of department stores in New York. Each of these was typical of a certain social class, and going on the assumption that employee use the pronunciation which holds for their typical customers. He could then examine the kind of English used in each store to get samples without people knowing that they were acting an information for a linguist. Labo checked in advance what items were for sale on the fourth floor and then asked a store employee where he could find these items. After the individual responded on the fourth floor, he asked again, pretending that he did not hear the first time. This supplied him with a more careful pronunciation of the two words. Labo saw in this technique a means of gaining genuine pronunciations which were not spoiled by speakers' awareness of providing data for an investigating linguist. Of course, there are disadvantages to this method. Above all, the small quantity of data which can be gleaned at any one time, and the inability to do a sound recording which one could listen to afterwards. Social linguistic data, whereas traditional dialectology focused on the relationship between language and geography. Urban dialectology is more concerned with the relationship between language and social factors. Furthermore, the methods of traditional dialectology differ from those of urban dialectology in terms of the selection of information. The data of traditional dialectology was often obtained by asking informants to fill in questionnaires consisting of questions for words used in a rural setting. Very often, the outcome of this method consisted of one word answers. Since social linguistic is more interested in phonology and grammar rather than in vocabulary, the method of eliciting data have to ensure stretches of these free spoken speech which are suitable for evaluation. Depending on the size of the survey and on its objectives, the number of informants and thus the amount of data might vary. Where large amounts of data are evolved, informants must be classified along various lines. With urban groupings, traditional divisions of class may not always be suitable. At the very least, the basis for these divisions must be made explicit. For that reason, linguistics often categorize speakers by factors such as occupation, income, education, and housing, quite apart from age and gender. Social linguistics and language change. When a system is dynamic and shows movement, there is change. This truism applies to language as much as it does to any other area. During the heyday of historical linguistics in the 19th century, changes which had taken place over the centuries was described in great detail. However, the mechanism of language change were only partially considered. Only internal change in sound system and grammar were investigated, but the large area of externally motivated change examined by determined by currents in society was never given its due recognition. With the advent of social linguists, the process of language change became the subject of close scrutiny. Social linguists maintained that the minute shift in language use, which can be observed in contemporary societies, are in accumulation, no different from the large scale change observed over centuries. In particular, William Labo concerned himself with the process and stages of language change. Here, he recognized three phases which can be summarized as Labo's three stages of language change. One is origin, a period in which a period in which alternative variants for established variants begin to appear. Two is propagation, the stage at which the new variants establish themselves to the detriment of the older ones which are sidelined. Three is conclusion, the stage at which the remaining variants are replaced completely by new variants, remain as a residue after the change has terminated. Various external factors can accelerate the process of language change. Above all, social pressure from above or below. Additional factors are the degree of literacy in a community, the restraining influence of the standard of a language, the relative prestige of speakers favoring new forms, etc. The course of language change shows a typical rate which involves a slow beginning, a relatively rapid middle section, and a deceleration towards the end. Schematically, these three phases correspond to the beginning, middle, and end of an S curve, which is frequently used as a visualization of language and change. Social networks. James and Leslie Milroy began investigating language use in Belfast in 1970s and continued for over a decade. At the center of the Milroy's work is the notion of social network, adopted from work on sociology. All speakers have a place in the network of their social environment. This network consists of ties of varying strength depending on the social bond the speaker entertain within their neighborhood. There is a general assumption that for those on the lower end of the socio-economic scale, the ties are stronger than for those further up the scale. New works can be defined by how dense and multiplex they are. For instance, if a speaker A not only not only knows other speakers B, C, D, E, etc., but the latter also know each other, then the network is dense. If the individuals in a network are more isolated and not mutual acquaintance, then it shows low density. A network is multiplex of its members interact in more than one way. That is, if members have a number of work colleagues in their network with whom they also spend their spare time through communal neighborhood activities or sports, for example, then the network is multiplex because there is more than one factors uniting members. A forced and bound network can impose rigid linguistic norms on its members, which in turn acquire a defining character, albeit an unconscious one, for the network itself. Such networks tend to be tend to be impervious to influence from outside, specifically from the prestigious norms of society of which they are part. Speakers who engage in loose knit networks such as the suburban middle classes are relatively more accessible to language norms because loose networks do not show clear defining features. These speakers adopt the norms of the socially prestigious standard. Conversely, working class section of society, those with strong networks, do not see middle class speech as a model because they have their own linguistic norms from within their network. Certain generalizations about networks can be made. The relative strength of a network depends on the weight accorded by speakers to conflicting forces in society, status, and solidarity. In if speakers apps if speakers opts for status, then they are likely to have weak ties to try to move upwards on a social scale, striving to achieve professional status and economic success. Should speakers opt for solidarity, then they generally remain in their surroundings, maintaining ties with neighbors and participating in the life of the community. Solidarity is an aspect of social behavior which has a linguistic component. Speakers who demonstrate solidarity exhibit elegance to the vernacular norms of their neighborhood, frequently in contradictions to those of the socially prestigious forms of language. The linguistic norms of community are local, whereas status features are diffuse and vault. For a much wider area, typically for an entire country. The number of defining features of low status, high solidarity varieties is usually quite high. The linguistic norms of such communities can be difficult if not impossible for non-natives to acquire. The identity function of high solidarity variety implies that one can exclude those who are not native to the community. Dense multiplex network ties seem furthermore to hold especially for young males. Women and middle aged speakers in general tend to opt more for status and to tone down the linguistic signs of strong network ties. A network is much smaller than a class, which is general characterization of social status, whereas a network is an aerial reality, typically a part of a city. There is, of course, a correlation to class inasmuch as people in a network usually belong to a single socio-economic group, and those in the strongest networks tend to be lowest on this scale. Given their relatively small scale, network form a consensus based micro level within society. The bonding within the class is achieved through similarly in socio-political outlook and not by identification with a certain locale. Dear friends, today you have heard, you are listening about the mystery, chemistry, and history of the language. How these languages work like a tool, like a means for providing us success in our life, for understanding the modern technology that is entirely based on the linguistic styles and language, literature, grammar. Thank you. Nice to see all of you. Nice to talk to you. Thank you. Thanks